Data scientist Michael Donovan penned a highly critical article about the state of affairs at the City of Johannesburg, particularly in relation to the high levies it charges on critical services to residents like water and electricity. He states that the continued increase of annual charges has led the city to earn less revenue, not more, and that's despite an appreciable increase in the city's population. He's also critical about the city's approval of a R2.5 billion loan, which on the face of it looks like it will be used to fund operational expenses rather than much needed development. Well, to unpack his thoughts further, I'm joined by Michael Donovan. Thank you very much for joining us, Michael. So for the benefit of our viewers who didn't have sight of your article, what were the key areas that you were highlighting around the unsustainability of the City of Johannesburg's finances?
The one point I wanted to highlight was the fact that increasing electricity tariffs result in reduced municipal income. So the higher the increase, the less money the city gets or any municipality gets. So we've been faced with a whole range of tariff increases, but they're really hurting the municipality unnecessarily.
Specifically, Michael, I just wanted to get into that. How have Johannesburg's pricing policies on water and electricity impacted on the city's revenues and, most importantly, on local residents?
So the city is faced with a situation where tariff increases are set by NERSA. Rand Water jumps aboard, increases its water tariffs accordingly, although the price of electricity has got very little to do with the price of water. And what residents have been doing has been cutting back on their own consumption and of both water and electricity. So we're in a situation now that within 2 years, City of Johannesburg will be paying more to Eskom each year than it gets from selling electricity to residents. So, and that is a disastrous situation because 90% of city revenue should be coming from service charges and rates. Now, electricity and to a lesser extent water are no longer available as revenue sources.
Yeah. So one of the things that you've noted, of course, is that because the revenue is shrinking, even though they keep on raising the rates and the levies and so on and so forth, the city has now turned to the capital markets to borrow money. And you've been critical about the R2.5 billion that's been borrowed of late, or that is intended to be borrowed of late. Just elaborate on your concerns there, because I suppose ultimately that debt has to be paid. And if the revenues are shrinking, you know, one wonders where that money will come from, not only to pay the debt, but to continue to provide services.
So the problem there is that this loan from the French Development Bank comes in at almost 15% interest rate. This is extraordinarily expensive. And that is not a interest rate that you get for capital expenditure. So it does appear that the city is using this for its recurrent expenses, for its ongoing expenses. So the issue is that if we are having to borrow at 15% interest to keep the city afloat, we are in deep trouble. And ultimately what's going to happen is that water revenue is drying up, electricity revenue is almost gone, and the city is now reverting to increased tax levels.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay, so let's get to the positive stuff. Your analysis obviously does show that there's a lot of lack in terms of the City of Johannesburg ability to take care of the city and, you know, be financially responsible. And of course, it's going to be a strain for residents if they continue having to pay the kind of rates that they're having to pay. So what then is the solution? And also just referring to what the Auditor General was saying more broadly about local municipalities, what needs to happen to actually improve not just the City of Johannesburg, but, you know, municipalities at large?
Remember, the Auditor General is simply looking at compliance, which is really the easiest aspect of running a city. She's looking to see whether or not Johannesburg complies with the rules that have been set out by government to get loans, to issue tenders, etc., etc. She is silent as to whether or not these loans, for example, are a good idea. She simply looks at whether or not procedures were conformed to. So, and we have a deep problem because it looks like the political system is not working. The opposition parties supported this 15% loan, basically because they can see no other way out. But all it does is kick the crisis down the road. We're going to have to pay it back, and our children are going to have to pay it back. And the mayor of Johannesburg is looking for another 2 billion in loans for capital expenditure. So we are deep in debt. We are effectively bankrupt.
Yeah, Michael, that is very negative indeed, but I just want to hear from you, what can we do to turn the tide? Is it a case of capacitating the city more? Is it a case of better leadership? What is needed in order to change this situation?
I agree with the Auditor General with the general statement that this is really due to lack of leadership. But I think, too, that it's a lack of leadership both from the political representatives and from the senior officials in Johannesburg City. They are not ensuring that the right decisions are made. So, for example, this revelation that within 2 years we'll be paying more to Eskom than we get from taxpayers, from residents. This is not a revelation that's been made by the municipality, but by the opposition. It's not a revelation being made by the city mayor. So I think we have a massive problem where we need a dramatic reconstruction of how the city is led and who leads it.
One last question, Michael. Do you think, with things as they are, do you think that those who can afford to pay their rates are paying them, you know, that necessarily everyone pays their rates, or there's a level of dissatisfaction around the service delivery? People always complaining about potholes, the state of the roads, the state of the streets, etc., lights not working. Do you think people are choosing not to actually pay their rates because they're dissatisfied? And if that continues, surely that's also negative as well.
That certainly is a factor, and it's probably most manifest where people who do have the money now drill boreholes, fill in their swimming pools, get solar. So it's a way of avoiding their interaction with a state which they see is not performing. And large numbers of people are disengaging with the City of Johannesburg to the maximum extent possible. We've also got a situation where 10 years ago, 30% of the revenue Joburg got from electricity sales went to the city. Now only 10% of the revenue that Joburg gets goes to the city. And that's largely a reflection of wastage and of theft, both of electricity and of water. And that massive level of theft was a reflection of the unwillingness to pay the political consequences of stopping the theft. Now the city has to pay the political consequences of failing to have stopped the theft. So theft is a far bigger problem than resistance by residents.
Yeah, indeed. Michael, thank you so much for your insights there. That was Michael Donovan. He's a data scientist giving us his view on the state of local municipalities' finances, specifically the city of Johannesburg.